Dad stepped into the living room and stopped the moment he saw my face. "Anna, why are your eyes swollen?" His voice was gentle, but the kind that makes your chest tighten instead of relax. I tried to look away, pretending I had just woken up. But the redness around my eyes told a different story. Dad took a slow breath, studying me the way only a father can. And in that quiet moment, I realized he had already understood everything I had been trying so hard to hide. Welcome to Grandmaa Memorial Stories. I share emotional life stories here every day. And I'd truly appreciate it if you hit subscribe and left a like. Now let's get back to my story. And trust me, you'll want to hear this one till the end. My days had started blending together so much that sometimes I forgot what day it even was. Living with Michael and his mother, Karen, didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a routine I had been forced into, one I couldn't escape from no matter how hard I tried. Every morning I woke up before anyone else. Not because I wanted to, but because I had learned the hard way that if Karen woke up before me, she would make sure the entire day began with her voice cutting through the walls. I moved slowly, quietly, careful not to make any noise. Even opening a cabinet too fast could start a lecture. I went straight to the kitchen and began making breakfast. Eggs. Toast. Coffee. The same thing every day. Sometimes I wondered if they even liked the food or if they just liked having someone to command. Karen usually came downstairs first. And the first thing she did was look at me, not to greet me, not to check how I was doing, but to find something wrong. "You didn't heat the pan enough. The eggs are too dry. You're always rushing. Michael deserves better than this." I used to try defending myself in the beginning. But when every word you say gets twisted into something worse, you eventually stop speaking. So now, I just listened and nodded. It was easier that way. Michael came down after her, usually still half asleep, and most days he didn't even look at me. If he did, it was only to agree with whatever his mother had said. "Mom's right, Anna. Just be more careful next time." That sentence became so normal that sometimes it felt like it echoed inside my head. No matter what happened, Karen was right, and I was wrong. After breakfast, Michael left for work. Karen stayed home. And that was the hardest part of the day. She followed me from room to room, watching everything I did. If I folded clothes, she unfolded them to show me the right way. If I cleaned the kitchen, she wiped a finger across the counter and sighed loudly, as if I had forgotten half the job. If I sat down for even 2 minutes, she would remind me that women who rest too much lose their value. Sometimes she talked for hours, telling me how her marriage had been, how she did everything perfectly, how she never disappointed anyone. And then she'd look at me with that same cold expression and say, "You should learn something from me, Anna." She didn't want me to learn. She wanted me to break. By afternoon, I usually felt so heavy and tired that even lifting a glass of water felt like work. But I kept moving. I didn't have a choice. Michael would text occasionally. "Make sure the laundry's done. Mom says you didn't clean the bathroom properly. You need to be more organized." Nothing sweet. Nothing caring. Just reminders that I was failing in their eyes. Dinner time was even worse than breakfast. Karen liked to criticize me in front of Michael so she could show him how patient she was with me. I told her to chop the vegetables smaller, but she doesn't listen. "Anna always forgets something. You should talk to her. She needs discipline." And Michael would just nod, eating quietly, letting her shape his opinion like clay. One evening, I accidentally broke a plate while doing dishes. It slipped from my hand because I was so tired I didn't feel my fingers. The sound of it shattering on the floor felt like the end of the world. Karen rushed in, angry. Michael followed her a minute later. "It was just a plate," I whispered. But they stared at me like I had done something unforgivable. "Just be more careful," Michael said again. Same tone. Same coldness. No sign that he ever saw how tired I really was. That night, I cried quietly in the bathroom with the shower running so they wouldn't hear me. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were swollen. Her face looked pale. And her shoulders, they didn't look like they could carry anything anymore. I told myself things would get better. People always say marriages have phases. Maybe this was ours. But deep down, something in me whispered that this wasn't a phase. This was normal for them. And slowly, it had become normal for me too. I stopped calling my dad as much. He asked to see me almost every week, but I always found excuses. I'm busy. I'm tired. Maybe next weekend. I didn't want him to see me like this. I didn't want him to know how I lived, how small my world had become. He would ask, "Anna, are you okay?" And I always said, "Yes, of course." But the truth was something I couldn't bring myself to say out loud. Every day in that house felt like walking on thin ice. Every breath felt borrowed. Every smile felt forced. And before I knew it, my life had become a long list of things I couldn't say, couldn't feel, couldn't show. I didn't know it then. But the cracks inside me were growing so deep that soon, someone was going to notice. And that someone was my dad. I used to think Karen's criticism in the mornings was the worst part of my day. But I was wrong. Her real power didn't show in the small comments she threw at me over breakfast. It showed in the way she slowly took over every minute, every space, and every choice in my life, so quietly that at first, I didn't even realize it was happening. It started with little things. She would rearrange the kitchen cabinets after I organized them. She'd shift plates, cups, spices, pens, everything, to places only she knew. Then she'd wait until I reached for something and couldn't find it. "See? This is what happens when you don't pay attention," she'd say, shaking her head like she was disappointed in a child. If I tried to defend myself, she'd sigh loudly and say, "I'm only trying to help you, Anna. You should be thankful someone is teaching you how to run a home." I didn't feel thankful. But I stayed quiet. The second stage of her control came with rules, unspoken ones, but very real. I could only wash dishes her way. I could only fold laundry her way. I could only use certain towels for certain tasks. I couldn't sit unless she sat first. I couldn't go out unless she allowed it. And worst of all, I couldn't close my bedroom door without her permission. Once, Michael found me sitting on our bed with the door slightly closed because I needed a moment to breathe. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just opened the door wide and said, "Mom doesn't like closed doors. You know that." As if it was normal. As if it was reasonable. As if I was the one doing something wrong. Karen never missed a chance to remind me that she owned the house. "This is my home," she said one afternoon as I cleaned the living room. "My rules. My way. Michael understands that. I hope you do too." She looked at me from head to toe before adding, "And Anna, sometimes I feel you forget your place." My place. 2 words that sat in my chest like a weight. After that, she began involving herself in every aspect of my daily schedule. She'd knock on my door early in the morning to give me a list of chores. Not suggestions, orders. Clean the bathrooms. Vacuum the upstairs hall. Wash all the towels. Scrub the stove. Organize the pantry. Rewash the dishes because she didn't trust the dishwasher. And if I finished early, she added more. She always added more. But what hurt the most wasn't the work. It was the way she watched me do it. If I swept the floor, she'd stand behind me to see if I missed a spot. If I cooked, she'd stand next to me and sniff the food before tasting it. If I did laundry, she'd check every shirt like she was searching for hidden mistakes. And if she found one tiny thing wrong, she wouldn't speak to me. She'd speak to Michael. "Your wife doesn't take responsibility. Your wife doesn't follow instructions. Your wife is careless. and Michael listened to her like every word she said was a fact. Sometimes he repeated it to me later. Mom says you're distracted. Maybe try focusing more. Mom says you need to be more careful. Mom is just trying to help you. Don't take it personally. But how was I supposed to not take it personally when everything in that house, including my own husband, reminded me daily that I wasn't good enough? Karen's control grew bigger in ways I didn't expect. She began controlling what I wore. That color doesn't suit you. Why do you buy such cheap clothes? Michael doesn't like when women dress too casually. Fix your hair. It looks messy. Once, she stood in front of me and actually tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear like I was some messy little girl she needed to fix. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. Then came the next stage, controlling my communication. If my phone rang, she asked who it was. If I texted someone, she wanted to know what I wrote. If my dad called, she made sure I took the call in the living room where she could hear every word. She didn't stop me from talking to him. But she made sure it never felt private. Once, when my dad called just to check on me, she hovered like a shadow behind the couch. I had to pretend everything was fine. Oh, I'm okay, Dad. Just busy. Yes, everyone here is good. No, I'm not tired. Karen smiled at me during the whole call. Not kindly, but in a way that made it very clear. She knew I wouldn't dare say the truth. When the call ended, she said, "You should talk less. It's better for a housewife to keep her mind focused on the home." Her next target was my social life, or whatever little was left of it. She didn't like my friends. She thought they were bad influences. She didn't want me going out with them. She didn't want them visiting. She didn't even want me talking to them for too long. "You have responsibilities here," she'd say. "You don't need outside distractions." Michael didn't argue. He simply nodded. "She's right, Anna. Focus on the house." Sometimes I wondered if they even remembered I was a person. Not a servant. Not a project. Not someone to train or correct. A person. Karen's control reached its peak when she started making decisions meant only for Michael and me. She chose how our money was spent. She decided what furniture we kept. She even planned our weekends without asking. One night, she sat down at the dining table and said, "I don't think you two are ready for children. You can barely manage the house." She said it calmly, like she was discussing the weather. And Michael agreed. Immediately. "You're right, Mom. It's not the right time." He didn't even look at me. That moment hurt more than any criticism she had thrown at me. Because it wasn't just Karen controlling my life anymore. Now she was controlling my future. My dreams. My choices. My marriage. I felt like a guest in my own life. A silent one. An unwanted one. A replaceable one. The worst part was how normal it all started to feel. Her voice in the morning. Her rules. Her judgment. Michael taking her side every single time. I slowly stopped expecting anything. I stopped hoping someone would understand. I stopped imagining things could get better. It was easier not to hope. Hope hurt too much. And then, one morning, I woke up, looked in the mirror, and saw something that scared me more than Karen's anger or Michael's coldness ever had. I didn't see myself anymore. Just tired eyes. Swollen, red, hollow eyes. Karen's control had taken more than my time and freedom. It had taken my spirit. But what I didn't know then was that someone else had started noticing too. And that someone was my dad. If someone had asked me in the beginning whether Michael was a cold person, I would have said no. I would have said he was quiet, focused, serious, the kind of man who didn't show too much emotion but cared in his own way. But that version of Michael, the one I married, The one I used to trust. The one I believed in. He slowly faded away. And what replaced him was someone I barely recognized. It didn't happen overnight. It happened quietly. Small changes, tiny moments, small shifts in the way he looked at me, spoke to me, or avoided me altogether. At first, he stopped asking how my day was. It didn't seem like a big deal. I told myself he was busy with work, tired, stressed. Then he stopped noticing when I cooked his favorite meals. He'd eat silently, eyes on his phone, responding with nothing more than a dry, "It's fine" or "okay." Then he stopped hugging me when he came home. No "how are you?" No "I missed you." Not even eye contact sometimes. But the moment that made my chest tighten was the first time he walked past me like I wasn't even there. I had been standing in the hallway, folding towels, when he entered the house. He brushed past me, not accidentally but intentionally, like I was a piece of furniture in his way. No smile. No glance. Nothing. I stood there holding a towel, frozen, wondering when my husband forgot I existed. Karen's voice filled the gaps he used to fill. She spoke for him. She made decisions for him. She even explained his moods to me like I was a child who needed instruction. He's working hard, Anna. Don't bother him with little things. He doesn't like too many questions. He needs peace, not whining. I hesitated. It's just 1 hour. Karen gave a cold smile. And who will finish the housework? Me? Before I could answer, Michael walked into the kitchen. Everything okay? Karen placed her hand on her hip dramatically. Your wife wants to leave the house today. She's very busy, but apparently she needs coffee with a friend. Michael looked at me with a tired expression. Anna, can't it wait? You have responsibilities. That was it. Just like that, my plan to meet my friend was gone. It was such a small thing, but it chipped something inside me. Another small incident happened the next day. I was slicing vegetables, and the knife slipped, cutting my finger. It wasn't deep, but it hurt. Karen looked at me disapprovingly. You're too careless. A woman your age should know how to handle a knife properly. I bit my tongue, washed my hand, and kept cooking. Later, when Michael came home, Karen told him before I could. She cut herself today, she said. I keep telling her to slow down and pay attention. Michael looked at me with mild annoyance. Anna, why can't you just be careful? Small words. But they stayed with me far longer than the cut on my finger. Another moment. One that felt tiny but heavy. Happened in the living room. Michael and I were sitting on the couch when Karen walked in holding a blanket. You folded this wrong, she said. I looked at it. It was just a blanket. A simple rectangle. I thought it was fine, I said quietly. Karen shook her head. No. Look how messy the edges are. Michael likes things neat. She turned to him. Doesn't this look messy? Michael didn't even glance at the blanket. Yes, Mom. It does. Then he looked at me and said, just fix it, Anna. A blanket. Just a blanket. But it felt like something much bigger. Another small incident happened when I made tea. Karen tasted it and made a face. It's too strong. Michael likes it lighter. I corrected her softly. Actually, he used to drink strong tea with. Karen interrupted. That was before marriage. Now he prefers lighter tea. When Michael came home, she handed him the cup. Here, I made your tea the way you like it. Michael took a sip, nodded, and said, This is perfect. I stood there silently, realizing Karen was rewriting parts of my husband. And he didn't even notice. Another day, I was on a call with my dad. I was tired, stressed, and my voice cracked a little. Before I could even finish talking, Karen appeared and stood behind me. I forced myself to sound cheerful. Everything is good, Dad. Karen smiled like she won a game. When the call ended, she said, "Good. No need to worry your father. He can't fix anything here." One sentence. But it stayed in my chest for days. Another incident happened when Michael misplaced his keys. He immediately said, "Anna, did you move them?" I hadn't touched them. But he still checked the shelf where I usually put things away. Later, Karen found them in Michael's jacket. She didn't apologize. She just said, "See? This is why we need a better system. Anna, organize the entry table tomorrow." I didn't argue. Arguing only made it worse. Every small incident added another layer of weight on my chest. None of them were big enough to call abuse. None of them were loud enough to call a fight. None of them were dramatic enough to tell someone about. But together, they changed the way I breathed, the way I walked, the way I existed. It felt like living in a maze designed by two people who already decided I would always be wrong. But small incidents don't stay small forever. They build a pattern. They form a story. And eventually, they reach someone who can see through the cracks. And for me, that someone was my dad, who was about to see more than I ever planned for him to see. People think breaking points come with screaming, slammed doors, or someone finally shouting, "I've had enough." But that wasn't mine. Mine came quietly. On a normal afternoon. In a moment so small that anyone else would have forgotten it the same day. But I didn't. Because that was the moment something inside me finally cracked. It started with something simple. A grocery list. Karen handed me a long list early in the morning, telling me to get everything before noon. I nodded, wrote down a few extra items we needed, and went out. When I came back home, bags in both hands, Karen stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed. "What is this?" she asked, pulling out a brand of pasta she didn't like. "It was on sale," I said gently. She placed it on the counter like it was something offensive. "We don't buy cheap things in this house. Michael hates low-quality groceries." I knew that wasn't true. Michael had never cared about brands. But saying anything would only start another lecture. I unpacked everything quietly while Karen kept shaking her head. When Michael came home later, Karen showed him the pasta like it was a crime. "Look what Anna brought home. Cheap stuff." Again. Michael didn't even ask me why. Didn't ask if there was a reason. He just shrugged and said, "You should have checked with Mom first." It was such a small sentence. But it made my chest feel tight. I said nothing. We ate dinner mostly in silence, and after cleaning up, I went upstairs to rest for just a minute. Just a minute. That's all I wanted. I sat on the edge of the bed, leaned forward, and closed my eyes. My head hurt. My back hurt. Everything felt heavy. I didn't even hear Karen walk in. "Are you resting?" she asked sharply. I opened my eyes quickly. "No, I was just." "You still haven't scrubbed the downstairs bathroom," she said. "You can rest after you learn how to manage a house." My throat tightened. I wanted to say I would do it in a moment. But she was already walking away. That night, something felt different. Something inside me felt tired. Not physically, but deeper. Like my heart was carrying too much weight. The next morning, the breaking point came. It was the first time Michael raised his voice at me. It didn't even start with me. It started with Karen complaining that the laundry wasn't dry yet. "It's humid today," I said softly. "It needs more time." Karen shook her head. Excuses. Always excuses. Before I could respond, Michael walked into the room and she quickly turned to him. "Your wife can't even dry clothes properly." Michael looked at the laundry basket, then at me. "Why is this still wet?" he asked. I told. My voice cracked a little. I told her it's humid. Michael pinched the bridge of his nose. Anna, why is everything always difficult with you? That sentence hit me hard. Harder than it should have. I'm trying, I whispered. Karen scoffed. You're not trying hard enough. Something inside me snapped. It was small, quiet, almost silent. But I felt it. I swallowed, blinked a few times, and kept folding the clothes. My hands were shaking. Michael stood there for another moment, watching me, waiting for me to explain myself. Even though he had already decided I was wrong. Finally he muttered, I can't deal with this right now. And walked away. I don't know why. But that sentence broke something deep inside me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was cold. Colder than anything he'd ever said. I felt my eyes sting instantly, but I held it in. I always held it in. Later that afternoon, I was washing dishes when Karen came up behind me. You know, she said calmly, Michael works too hard to come home to stress. My grip tightened on the sponge. I didn't respond. I'm telling you this for your own good, she continued. If you don't change, he'll eventually get tired. My heart sank. She wasn't warning me. She was threatening me. And for the first time, I didn't have the strength to hide how much it hurt. I stepped away from the sink, went to the bathroom, and locked the door. I sat on the floor and finally let the tears fall. They didn't fall loudly. Just quietly. Like everything else in my life. I cried because I felt alone. Because nothing I did was right. Because Michael didn't see me anymore. Because Karen saw everything. But only the parts that made me look small. I cried because I didn't recognize myself. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and opened the door a few minutes later. But Karen was standing right there, waiting. You are crying, she said flatly. I looked down. I'm fine. You can't break down over small things, she said. It makes you look weak. I walked past her without responding. I didn't have the energy. That evening, while setting the table, my dad called. I picked up the phone, trying to steady my voice. Hey, sweetheart, he said. Just checking on you. And that one simple sentence, just checking on you, was enough to make my eyes fill again. I turned my face away from Karen so she wouldn't see. I'm okay, Dad. He paused. Are you sure? Karen stepped closer. Dinner's getting cold, Anna. I wiped my eyes quickly. Yes, Dad. Everything's fine. I'll talk to you later. But when I hung up the phone, Dad wasn't convinced. A father knows. And that evening, when I was clearing the plates, Michael said something I'll never forget. You need to stop being so sensitive. Mom and I are both trying to help you. Help me. They thought they were helping me. That was the moment. The true breaking point. When everything inside me felt heavy, empty, and numb all at once. I realized I wasn't just tired. I wasn't just stressed. I wasn't just emotional. I was breaking. Quietly. Slowly. Dangerously. And the people around me didn't even notice. But my dad. He had started noticing. And soon, I wouldn't be able to hide anything from him anymore. My dad had never been the kind of person who forced himself into my private life. Growing up, he always said, if you need me, I'll be here. If you don't, I'll still be here. But even he reached a point where he couldn't pretend everything was fine anymore. It started with small calls. Short conversations. Just checking in. Just wanting to hear my voice. But each time, I tried to sound normal. Like nothing was wrong. Like everything at home was okay. Like Michael still looked at me the same way he used to. But fathers have a way of hearing the truth behind words. And mine did. That week, he called more than usual. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the evening. I'd say I was cooking. Or cleaning. Or tired. And every time, he'd pause before hanging up, like he wanted to ask something but wasn't sure if he should. One afternoon, while Michael and Karen were out shopping, Dad called again. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "You sound a little off today." I forced a small laugh. "No, Dad. I'm fine. Just tired." The silence on the other end told me he didn't believe me. "Anna," he said carefully, "are you eating well?" "Yes." It was half true. "Are you resting?" "Yes." That was a lie. "Is Michael treating you right?" My throat tightened instantly. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Dad didn't push. He just sighed. A soft, worried sound I had never heard from him before. "You know," he said gently, "you never have to hide anything from me." That sentence almost broke me again. I swallowed hard. "I'm okay, Dad." "Really?" Before he could respond, I heard the front door open. Karen's voice echoed through the hallway. "Anna, come help carry the bags." I lowered my voice. "Dad, I'll call you later." But before I hung up, he said something quietly. "I'm coming to see you soon." My heart skipped. "No, Dad, it's fine, you don't have to." "I want to," he said. "And I miss you." I didn't have the strength to argue, so I just whispered, "Okay," and ended the call. The next day, Dad showed up earlier than I expected. I was sweeping the living room when someone knocked on the door. Karen yelled from the kitchen. "Anna! Get that!" I wiped my hands on my clothes and opened the door. My dad stood there. His eyes scanned my face instantly, searching, reading, understanding. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. I froze for a second. Something inside me softened, something I had been holding tightly for weeks. "Dad, you're here." He reached out and gently touched the side of my arm, not in a dramatic way, just the way a worried parent does when they're trying to make sure you're real. "You look tired," he said quietly. Before I could answer, Karen stepped into the hallway. Well, she said, smiling in that forced way she always did around him. "Robert. What a surprise. You should have told us you were coming." Dad shook her hand politely, but his attention stayed on me. "I was in the area," he said. "Thought I'd check on my daughter." Karen's smile stiffened. "Well, she's fine. We take very good care of her." Dad didn't respond to that. He just nodded and walked in. Michael came down the stairs a moment later. When he saw Dad, his surprise lasted only a second before he put on his polite face. "Robert, good to see you." Dad didn't smile. He just said, "I'd like to talk to Anna alone, if that's all right." I saw Karen and Michael exchange a quick glance. That silent kind of communication they always had. Like they were deciding what version of the story to present. Karen spoke first. "Oh, she's busy with chores today. Maybe later." Dad cut her off gently but firmly. "It'll only take a few minutes." Karen didn't like that. Not at all. But she forced a nod and stepped aside. Dad motioned toward the backyard. "Let's talk out there." I followed him, my heart beating in my throat. We sat on the small wooden bench near the fence. Dad looked around the yard for a moment before speaking. When he finally did, his voice was calm but serious. "Anna, what's going on here?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. He watched me the way only a father can. Quietly, patiently, giving me space. "You're not yourself," he continued softly. "Your voice is different. Your eyes look tired. And you flinch every time someone calls your name." I blinked fast, staring at my hands. I'm okay, I whispered. Dad shook his head. No, you're surviving. That's not the same. The words hit me harder than I expected. I felt my throat tighten, and I looked away so he wouldn't see the tears forming. Is Michael hurting you? He asked softly. My eyes snapped up. No. Not physically. Never physically. Dad sighed. Then emotionally? I didn't answer. Silence answered for me. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Anna, has he changed? I nodded slowly. And Karen? I swallowed. She doesn't like me very much. Dad gave a small, humorless smile. I figured. His expression softened again. Sweetheart, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want to worry you, I whispered. And I kept hoping things would get better. He reached out and held my hand. Warm, steady, grounding. You don't have to go through this alone. You never did. My lips trembled. A tear slipped down my cheek, and Dad quietly wiped it away with his thumb like he used to when I was little. You're exhausted, he said gently. I can see it. I can hear it. I can feel it. More tears fell. I'm trying, Dad, I whispered. I really am. I know, he said softly. And that's exactly why I'm worried. You're trying so hard you're disappearing. Something inside me broke then. Not the painful cracking I'd felt before. But a softer break. Like finally letting go of a weight I'd been carrying alone. Dad pulled me into a hug, and I leaned against him, feeling small and safe and fragile all at once. I'm here now, he whispered. You don't have to hide anything anymore. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. Really breathe. And Dad felt every shaky breath, every trembling exhale. Whatever was coming next. He wasn't going to let me face it alone. After Dad left that afternoon, something in the house felt different. Not for Michael. Not for Karen. For them, it was just another ordinary day. But for me, Dad's visit had shaken something loose inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. Not judged. Not lectured. Not blamed. Just seen. And Karen noticed it immediately. She noticed everything. The next morning, when I came downstairs, Karen was standing in the kitchen with her arms crossed, like she had been waiting. So, she said calmly, your father came. I nodded. Yes. She gave a tight smile. I hope you didn't complain about us. I didn't, I said quietly. Good, she said. Because airing personal issues to outsiders is disrespectful. Outsiders. She meant my dad. I didn't respond. There was no point. Karen always believed her view was the only view. But I could tell she didn't believe me. Later that day, while I was folding laundry, she walked into the room again. You've become distant, she said. I looked up at her. Distant? I repeated softly. Yes. Your attitude. Your tone. Even the way you speak to Michael. She tilted her head slightly. It feels like someone has been putting thoughts in your head. I knew what she meant. My heart tightened. Dad didn't. She cut me off. Listen, Anna. This family works a certain way. Michael and I make decisions. You follow them. That's how this home stays peaceful. Peaceful. That word felt like a joke. Karen stepped closer. Your father doesn't understand how things work here. He never has. And frankly, his influence is becoming a problem. I swallowed hard. Karen, I said softly, Dad just cares about me. That's the problem, she said. He cares too much. He makes you emotional. And emotional people make poor decisions. I folded another towel, keeping my eyes down so she wouldn't see how deeply her words cut. 2 days later, she crossed the line. Michael had gone to work early, and Karen asked me to help with the weekly deep cleaning. I agreed. I always agreed. But halfway through scrubbing the floor, she stood over me with her hands on her hips. "You missed a spot," she said. I scrubbed again. And another. I scrubbed more. When I finally finished, I sat back on my heels to catch my breath. Karen stared down at me, her expression sharp. "You're slowing down," she said. "You used to work harder." I didn't say anything. "You look distracted," she continued. "Like your mind is somewhere else. Maybe on your father? Maybe he told you something and now you think you deserve more than what you have here?" My chest tightened. "I didn't say that," I murmured. "But you're thinking it," she said. "I can see it." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Let me give you a piece of advice, Anna. If you want this marriage to survive, you'll stop letting him fill your head with nonsense." Something inside me trembled. "Dad didn't fill my head with anything," I whispered. "He just cares." Karen's expression hardened instantly. "That's exactly the nonsense I'm talking about," she snapped. "He makes you needy. He makes you weak. And weak daughters become weak wives." I felt my throat tighten painfully. She leaned even closer. "You don't tell him things," she said. "You don't let him interfere. And you certainly don't run to him when things get difficult here." I stayed quiet, but inside, something was twisting. Karen wasn't finished. "Michael told me you cried in the bathroom the other day," she said. Her voice wasn't sympathetic. It was irritated. "He said you're becoming too emotional. Too sensitive. It's draining him." That hurt more than I expected. "Michael told her that?" Karen continued, her tone sharp. "You need to toughen up. Or you're going to push him away." I took a slow breath. "Karen, I'm doing my best." "No," she said coldly. "Your best would be keeping your father out of your marriage." I finally looked up at her. "He's my dad." "And Michael is your husband," she snapped. "And I am his mother. Which means I know what's best for him. And for you." Something inside me broke again. Not like before. This time, it was a painful, shaking break. Like my heart was trying to push back but didn't have the strength. Karen saw it. She always saw it. She smoothed her blouse, straightened up, and said, "If you don't like how things are, you're welcome to leave. But if you stay, you follow the rules of this house." The words hit me like a cold wave. Was she actually telling me to leave? Before I could respond, the front door opened and Michael walked in. Karen's entire tone changed instantly. "Michael," she called sweetly. "We were just talking about the chores. Anna needs a little guidance, but she's trying." Michael smiled faintly and kissed her cheek. Then he looked at me and said, "You okay? You look tired." Karen answered for me. "She's fine," she said quickly. "Just overwhelmed." Michael nodded, accepting her version of the story without question. He didn't ask what really happened. He didn't see the redness in my eyes. He didn't notice how I was holding my breath to keep it together. He just walked away. And Karen gave me one last look. Sharp, cold, victorious. That was the moment I realized something clearly. Karen didn't just dislike me. She wanted to break me. Piece by piece. Emotion by emotion. And for the first time, I felt something spark inside me. Not anger. Not rebellion. Just a tiny, trembling voice inside my chest whispering, "This isn't right. This isn't normal. This isn't how a marriage is supposed to be." Karen had crossed a line. A line she couldn't uncross. Because she had finally pushed me into a place where something new began to grow. Awareness. Strength. And the painful beginning of a question I had never dared ask before. What if Dad was right? If someone had told me months earlier that Michael, the man I trusted, the man I defended, the man I loved, would one day look at me with disappointment instead of affection, I wouldn't have believed it. But people don't change suddenly. They change slowly, quietly, in the spaces between the moments you choose to ignore. And eventually, the person you thought you knew becomes someone completely different. I just didn't want to see it at first. But in the days after Karen crossed the line, Michael made it impossible to ignore anymore. It began with small reactions. Like the way he stopped listening halfway through my sentences. Or how he sighed every time I tried to explain something. Or how his eyes always wandered to Karen whenever there was a disagreement, waiting for her expression before forming his own. But the real change began one evening when my dad called again. I stepped outside to speak with him, not wanting Karen to hover around or listen. Dad asked simple things. How are you feeling? Are you eating enough? Do you need anything? I tried to keep my voice steady, but the moment he asked, did something happen after I left? My eyes burned a little. No, I whispered. I'm okay. He paused. Sweetheart. I don't believe you. Not this time. I swallowed hard. Before I could respond, the back door opened. Michael stood there, arms crossed. Who are you talking to? He asked. I froze. Just my dad, I said softly. His jaw tightened before he stepped outside and closed the door behind him. You know Mom doesn't like when you take calls in the middle of chores, he said coldly. He just called to check on me, I said. Michael shook his head. You're making him worry for no reason. And now he probably thinks we're mistreating you. My breath caught. I never said that. You don't have to say it, he snapped. He can hear it in your voice. And it's embarrassing. Embarrassing. My dad checking on me embarrassed him. Before I could respond, Michael held out his hand. Give me the phone. I tightened my grip around it instinctively. Why? I whispered. So I can tell him everything is fine, he said. Since you can't say it without sounding emotional. Something inside my chest twisted sharply. Michael, no. He stepped closer. Anna. Give me the phone. I backed up slightly without thinking. Not out of fear. Out of hurt. I'll call him later, I said quietly. Please just, let it go. Michael stared at me for a long second before turning around and walking back inside, shaking his head like I was a problem he didn't want to deal with. I didn't cry then. I just stood there, feeling numb. Michael had never spoken to me like that before. But the part that hurt the most was the look on his face. Like he was disappointed in me for needing comfort. Later that night, the truth of Michael started revealing itself more clearly. We were getting ready for bed when he said, without looking at me, Mom told me you've been acting different since your dad came. I froze in place. What do you mean? I asked. He sighed. You've been distant. Moody. Sensitive. It's draining. Draining. That word stung. I'm not trying to be any of those things, I said softly. He finally looked at me. Well, it feels like you're choosing your dad's opinions over this family. I blinked in confusion. What opinions? He barely said anything. Exactly, Michael snapped. He shows up once, and suddenly you think everything here is wrong. I shook my head. No, I didn't say that. But you're acting like it, he insisted. You're acting like we're the reason you're unhappy. My voice trembled a little. Michael. I'm tired. That's all. He stared at me, searching my face. But instead of softness, something cold settled in his expression. You know what, Anna? If you can't handle simple responsibilities, then maybe you're not ready for a real marriage. A sharp ache shot through my chest. Michael, why would you say that? Because it's true, he said bluntly. Mom does more around here than you do. And she doesn't complain. That was it. That sentence made something inside me crack loudly. Karen doesn't have a job, I whispered before I could stop myself. She's home all day. I'm trying to do everything. Michael interrupted sharply. There you go again. Playing the victim. My breath caught. I'm not. Yes, you are, he said. You cry, you get emotional, you make everyone worry, and then you blame my mom for it. I felt my hands tremble. Michael, you don't see what she does, I said softly. She puts pressure on me. She criticizes me. He stepped closer, eyes hard. Don't talk about my mother like that. I swallowed. She treats me like. Stop. His voice was low and sharp. Mom has done nothing wrong, he said. You're overreacting. As usual. As usual. He said it like it was a fact. Like my feelings were inconveniences. Like my exhaustion was an exaggeration. Like my pain was something he could dismiss with one sentence. I didn't think you'd ever become this way, he added quietly. Emotional. Fragile. Difficult. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Not because of what he said, but because I realized something terrifying. Michael didn't see me anymore. Not the real me. Not the woman he promised to love. Not the person he married. He saw the version of me Karen painted. Weak. Emotional. Incompetent. And he believed her. The next morning, things got worse. I came downstairs and found Karen and Michael sitting at the table, having a quiet conversation. They stopped talking when I walked in. Karen gave me that sharp, assessing look. Michael simply said, "We need to talk later." My stomach dropped. "What about?" I asked. Michael didn't answer. He just stood up, grabbed his keys, and said, "We'll talk tonight. Don't make any plans." I stood there frozen, watching him walk away. Karen stepped beside me and whispered, "If you had listened from the beginning, this wouldn't be happening." My chest tightened painfully. What did I do?" I whispered. Karen smiled softly. The kind of smile that didn't touch her eyes. "You made my son unhappy." That was the moment I finally saw it clearly. Not through fear. Not through confusion. Not through exhaustion. But clearly. Michael wasn't just turning colder. He wasn't tired or overwhelmed. He was choosing Karen. Every time. Every argument. Every moment. And he wasn't coming back to me. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Maybe not at all. That day, I realized something painful and undeniable. Michael wasn't the man I married anymore. He wasn't the man who held my hand. He wasn't the man who cared about my feelings. He had become someone else. Someone I couldn't reach. Someone who looked at me like I was the problem. That was the day I stopped hoping he would defend me. And started preparing myself for whatever talk he had planned. Because deep down, I knew. Michael had finally shown his true colors. And they were nothing like the man I once loved. The whole day felt heavier than usual. I moved through the house quietly, finishing chores, keeping my distance, trying not to think about the talk Michael had planned for the evening. Karen kept watching me like she already knew what was coming. Like she'd been waiting for this moment. Every time she walked past me, she made a small comment under her breath. Make sure dinner is perfect tonight. Michael has had a rough week. Don't upset him again. You should look presentable when he gets home. Her words sank into me slowly, like tiny cold drops of water. Not enough to drown me, but enough to make breathing uncomfortable. By the time Michael finally came home, the sky outside had already turned gray. Karen greeted him at the door like she always did, warm, sweet, supportive. And I stood in the kitchen, pretending to be busy, pretending not to hear their conversation. But I heard one sentence clearly. "Did you talk to her yet?" Karen asked quietly. "I'm doing it tonight," Michael replied. Something inside me froze. I wasn't ready. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Not in any way. But I also knew I couldn't avoid it anymore. Michael came into the kitchen after washing his hands. His expression wasn't angry. Just tired. But not the tired you feel after a long day. This was the kind of tired people have when they already made up their minds. "Anna," he said, "can we sit?" I wiped my hands on a towel and nodded slowly. We sat at the small table, not the dining room, but the little corner table near the window. The one we used to sit at during late-night talks when we were newly married. Back then, he used to smile. Back then, he used to reach for my hand without thinking. Now he kept his hands folded on the table, far away from mine. "I've been thinking about a lot of things," he began. My heart thudded once, hard. "I feel like things have changed between us," he continued. "You've become distant. Emotional. Overwhelmed." I stayed quiet. "And every time something small happens, you take it personally," he said. "It's exhausting, Anna. For both of us." I finally spoke, my voice low. "I'm overwhelmed because I'm doing everything alone. I'm tired, Michael." "And your mom?" Michael lifted his hand sharply. "Don't bring Mom into this." I swallowed hard. "But she's part of the problem." "No," he said firmly. "You're seeing her as the problem because you're letting your dad influence you." I looked up, stunned. "My dad?" I whispered. "All he did was check on me." "And that's the issue," Michael said. "He fills your head with doubts. Negative thoughts. He makes you question everything." I shook my head slowly. "Michael, I'm questioning things because I'm hurting. Not because of Dad. Because of how things are here." His jaw tightened. "This is exactly what I mean," he muttered. "You're too sensitive now. You take everything the wrong way. You're making everything harder than it should be." The words stung, even though I had heard variations of them before. Michael took a deep breath. "Look. I need a wife who can handle life without falling apart every week. Mom shouldn't be dealing with your emotions. And I shouldn't have to play mediator between you two." I blinked hard, trying to keep tears from forming. "I'm not asking you to be a mediator," I said softly. "I'm asking you to stand with me. To defend me. To see what's happening." He leaned back in his chair, frustration clear in his eyes. "I can't defend you when you're the one creating problems." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "Problems," I repeated quietly. Michael didn't respond. So I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. "Michael, do you love me?" He hesitated. A silence so heavy filled the room that my stomach twisted. "Of course I do," he said finally. "But love doesn't mean ignoring issues. Love doesn't mean dealing with constant drama." Drama. He called my pain drama. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling something inside me crack in a new way. A deeper, quieter break. "Michael," I whispered, "I'm not creating drama. I'm drowning. And instead of pulling me up, you walk away." He stood up abruptly. "I'm done having the same conversation," he snapped. "I'm tired. Mom's tired. You're tired. This house is tense all the time because of emotions you can't control. My throat tightened painfully. I'm trying, I whispered. I don't see it, he said. Not anymore. His words hung in the air like a cold wind. I stood too, because sitting felt impossible. What do you want from me? I asked softly. Michael rubbed his forehead. I want peace, he said. I want a wife who doesn't cry every other day. I want Mom to feel respected in her own home. And I want you to stop running to your father every time you feel overwhelmed. I never ran to him, I said quietly. He came because he was worried. And now he's making everything worse, Michael said sharply. No, I whispered, tears finally slipping out. He's the only one who can see I'm slipping. Michael's expression hardened. You're not slipping. You're overreacting. I took a shaky breath. Then why does it hurt so much? I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the doorway and said, without turning around, Mom was right. You're losing yourself. And if things keep going this way, we're not going to make it. The words hit like a physical blow. Like something inside me shattered completely. Karen appeared behind him in the hallway. Not surprised. Not confused. Just quietly satisfied. Is everything all right? She asked, pretending innocence. Michael ran a tired hand down his face. I told her what needed to be said. Karen nodded slowly, then looked at me with a calm, almost gentle expression. This is why I've been trying to help you, Anna, she said softly. You're not stable right now. And Michael needs stability. My knees felt weak. Michael looked at me one more time. Then he said the words that changed everything. I need space. From all of this. My breath caught. Space? I whispered. He nodded once. I'll sleep downstairs tonight. We can talk again when you're calmer. When I'm calmer. When I'm the one who needs to change. He walked away. Karen followed him. And I stood there in the quiet kitchen, listening to the sound of his footsteps growing fainter. Something inside me. The last piece of hope. The last thread holding me together. Slipped out of my hands. That night, I didn't cry loudly. I didn't break down the way people expect. I didn't scream or beg or run. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, feeling an emptiness I had never felt before. A silence too heavy to carry. A pain too quiet to name. Because I finally understood something. Michael wasn't confused. He wasn't stressed. He wasn't influenced. He chose this. He chose Karen. He chose distance. He chose coldness. And he chose to let me break alone. I stayed on the edge of the bed long after Michael's footsteps faded downstairs. The silence of the room felt heavier than any scream he could have thrown at me. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't even move. I just sat there, feeling something inside me detach. It wasn't a dramatic moment. Just a quiet breaking. Like a thin thread finally snapping after carrying too much weight. When I finally got up, the house was still. Karen had disappeared into her room. Michael was downstairs, the faint flicker of the TV glowing underneath the crack of the door. For the first time since I married him, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I walked to the bathroom, shut the door gently, and leaned against the cold tile. And that's when it finally happened. My chest tightened. My breath hitched. And the tears I'd held back all day came pouring out. Not pretty tears. Not quiet sadness. These were deep, shaking sobs. That came from a place even I didn't recognize. I slid to the floor, hugging my knees as the world blurred around me. All the exhaustion. All the criticism. All the loneliness. All the blame. It all came flooding at once. And I broke. Truly broke. I don't know how long I cried. Minutes? Hours? The world outside didn't matter. When I finally calmed down, my face was swollen and my eyes stung. I washed them, took slow breaths, and stared at my reflection. I didn't recognize myself. I looked drained. Thin. Sad. Empty. And then a thought hit me. If Dad walked in right now, he would be heartbroken. He'd see the truth immediately. He'd see what I had been hiding. And suddenly, I didn't just miss him. I needed him. I needed someone who saw me. Someone whose voice wasn't sharp. Someone who didn't treat me like a burden. I wiped my face quickly and walked toward the door. But when I stepped outside, Karen was standing in the hallway. I froze. Her eyes went straight to my swollen eyes. And she smiled. A small, satisfied, controlled smile. "You should really get a grip," she said softly. "Crying won't fix anything. Michael hates emotional scenes." My breathing hitched. She stepped closer. "If you want him to stay, you'd better get yourself under control." Her voice was calm. Sharp. Calculated. But inside me, something shifted. I didn't respond. Not because I was scared, but because I suddenly didn't have the energy to argue anymore. I brushed past her and walked to the bedroom. That night, I slept alone. Not because Michael chose to sleep downstairs, but because I didn't want him near me. I lay awake staring at the ceiling. And for the first time in months, I allowed myself to whisper the truth. I'm not safe here. Not physically, but emotionally. And that kind of pain was starting to destroy me. By morning, I had made a decision. I needed to talk to Dad. Not pretend. Not hide. Not protect Michael or Karen. This time, I needed to tell him everything. Because if I didn't, I wasn't sure how much more of this I could survive. I called Dad early that morning. He answered on the first ring. "Anna? What's wrong?" My voice cracked immediately. "Dad, can you come?" He didn't ask another question. "I'm on the way." I think he could hear everything in those 5 words. When he arrived, I met him outside before Karen could appear. The moment he saw my face, puffy eyes, trembling hands, pale skin, his own face changed. He cupped my shoulders gently. "Sweetheart, what did they do?" I didn't hold back this time. The words came out like someone opening a floodgate. "Dad, I'm trying so hard. I'm doing everything. But Michael, he's not the same. He doesn't listen. He doesn't believe me. And Karen, she makes everything worse. She criticizes me. She blames me for things I didn't even do. She controls everything. And they think I'm the problem. They say I'm emotional. They say I'm weak. They say..." "Stop," Dad whispered, pulling me into his arms. His hug was steady. Warm. Safe. "You're not weak," he said firmly. "And you're not the problem." Tears spilled again. "I feel like I'm disappearing, Dad." He held me tighter. "You're coming with me," he said quietly. "Pack a small bag. I'm taking you home." My heart squeezed. "Dad, I can't just leave." "Yes, you can," he said. "And you're not leaving your marriage. You're just leaving the abuse." Before I could respond, the front door opened. Karen stepped out, shock flashing in her eyes. "Oh. Robert. You're here again?" Dad didn't let go of me. "Yes," he said calmly. "I'm taking my daughter with me for a few days." Karen blinked as if she misheard. "I'm sorry," she said sharply. "She lives here." Dad's tone didn't change. She won't be staying here for now. Karen's face twisted. Did she complain again? She's been emotional, Robert. Overreacting to small things. Dad stepped in front of me, shielding me. She's not emotional, he said firmly. She's exhausted. And she's hurting. And I will not stand here and let you tell me otherwise. Karen's expression tightened with anger. She belongs with her husband. Dad didn't even blink. She belongs where she is respected. Karen opened her mouth again, but before she could speak, Michael stepped outside. He froze when he saw us. What's going on? Dad turned to him, voice controlled but firm. I'm taking Anna with me for a few days. Michael's jaw clenched. What? Why? Dad didn't sugarcoat it. Because she's breaking, Michael. Right in front of you. And instead of helping her, you're letting your mother tear her down. Michael looked at Karen immediately. His reflex, his habit, his instinct. Karen stepped closer. She's exaggerating, Michael. You know she is. Dad's voice stayed calm. I've seen enough. I've heard enough. And I'm done watching my daughter fall apart in your home. Michael looked between us, confusion and frustration tightening his expression. Anna, he said, why didn't you tell me you were feeling like this? I blinked, stunned. I tried, I whispered. You never listened. Michael flinched. Karen stepped forward aggressively. You're not taking her anywhere. Dad turned toward her, eyes cold. She's an adult. She decides. Karen crossed her arms. This is my house. Dad cut her off sharply. And that is my daughter. Michael rubbed his temples. This is getting out of hand. Dad stared at him. Michael, when she cries, I want you to know that I saw. That I heard. That I tried. Michael swallowed. What does that mean? It means you didn't protect her, Dad said quietly. You didn't defend her. You didn't stand by her. And she's breaking because of it. Michael's face fell, but Karen stepped in quickly. She's not breaking, she's dramatic, she snapped. That was it. The moment everything snapped. Dad turned to Karen, voice sharp for the first time. You don't get to decide how much pain another woman feels. Karen froze. Dad took my hand gently. Anna, pack your things. I hesitated for one last painful moment. Michael reached out, his voice shaking. We can fix this, Anna. Just stay. Don't leave like this. My heart hurt. Deeply. Painfully. But I finally saw the truth. He wasn't reaching for me. He was reaching for the version of me who stayed quiet. Slowly, I shook my head. I need space, too, I whispered. Michael's hand dropped. Karen stared like she had lost a game she thought she had already won. Dad placed his hand on my back. Come on, sweetheart. And I walked away with him. For the first time in months. I felt air in my lungs. Dad brought me home. To the house I grew up in. To the room that once held all my childhood dreams. For the first time in months. I slept without fear. Without criticism. Without walking on eggshells. Over the next few days, Dad made sure I ate, slept, and rested. And slowly, the fog in my mind started to clear. I didn't feel healed. But I felt steady. Safe. Human. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. Michael called. Many times. I didn't answer at first. But after 3 days, I finally picked up. His voice was soft. Anna, please come home. Home. That word felt strange. Michael, I whispered, I'm not ready. I'm sorry, he said. I know I haven't been there for you. I didn't realize how bad things were. My chest tightened. Because you didn't want to see it. He didn't deny it. And Mom, he began. I cut him off. Michael. I can't go back to that house unless things change. Really change. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something I never expected. Mom shouldn't have treated you like that, he said softly. I'll talk to her. My heart twisted. Talking isn't enough, I whispered. She needs to understand she can't control our marriage. And you need to stop letting her. Michael exhaled shakily. I know. And I want to fix it. I closed my eyes. Then show me. The next day, something happened that changed everything. Michael came to Dad's house. Alone. He sat across from us, nervous, tired, but finally, aware. I didn't realize how much I hurt you, he said. Mom's been in my ear for so long, I didn't see what was happening. Dad stayed quiet, watching him. Michael looked at me. I want you to come home, but only if you feel safe. And if you do, things will be different. Mom won't be involved in our marriage anymore. We'll move out. My breath caught. Move out. Karen had controlled everything for so long. The idea felt unreal. Are you sure? I whispered. Michael nodded. I'm choosing you. Dad looked at him carefully. Then you better mean it, he said. Michael didn't hesitate. I do. When we finally returned to the house to pick up my things, Karen stood in the living room, waiting. Her face was stiff, part anger, part disbelief. You're really leaving? She said coldly. No, Michael said, stepping in front of me. We're moving out. Karen's eyes widened. What? Michael, no. Absolutely not. He held up a hand. Mom. Stop. This is my decision. Karen turned to me sharply. This is your fault. For the first time. I didn't lower my eyes. It's not my fault, I said calmly. It's your behavior. Karen's mouth fell open. She looked at Michael for support, but this time, he didn't step beside her. He stepped beside me. And that was it. Karen realized she had lost control. She stormed away without another word. Michael helped me gather my things, and when we walked out the door, a strange feeling washed over me. Relief. Real, deep relief. For the first time, I felt like the beginning of healing was possible. Not because everything was perfect, but because I wasn't alone anymore. Because someone finally chose me. Because my dad saved me when I couldn't save myself. And because Michael finally saw the line Karen had crossed. Too late, but not too late to fix. Thank you for listening to my story on Grandmaa Memorial Stories. I share true, emotional life stories here every day. If this one touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and stay with us. Because the next story might be the one you didn't know you needed.